I got healthier and I started losing some of the qualities I liked most about myself. I became less endlessly understanding, less willing to absorb what other people refuse to carry themselves, less compelled to read every shift in someone's mood and adjust myself around it. I stopped being impressed by how much pain I could endure without needing anything from anyone. None of that felt immediately liberating. Some of it felt like I was losing my compassion, my intuition, my independence, even my strength. I had spent years becoming proud of the woman who possessed those qualities. I wasn't prepared for healing to make me question how many of those qualities had been working for my survival. I've always been able to see beneath behavior. I can understand the fear underneath someone's anger, the shame underneath control, the wound underneath withdrawal or cruelty. I still consider that a gift, but there were relationships where my ability to understand another person became one of the most effective ways I abandoned myself. I could trace their behavior backward through their history until I made perfect psychological sense of it. Their behavior had an explanation, and somehow the explanation kept becoming more important than what their behavior was actually doing to me or our relationship. Eventually, I had to admit that sometimes understanding another person was easier than accepting what I already knew. As long as I remained fascinated by why someone behaved the way they did, I could postpone deciding what their behavior meant for me. I could keep studying the wound instead of responding to the person standing in front of me. I had confused my ability to see someone deeply with a responsibility to remain available to them. I started looking differently at qualities I had always called my personality. A child who learns that needing something creates vulnerability can become fiercely independent. The girl whose preferences create conflict can become exceptionally accommodating. Someone who discovers that usefulness protects connection can become the person everyone trusts when everything falls apart. I don't believe trauma created those capacities. I believe it found them and put them to work. I refuse to give suffering authorship over everything extraordinary in a human being. Trauma did not give me sensitivity, but sensitivity can be trained to watch for danger. It didn't give me intelligence, but intelligence can become consumed with prediction. It did not give me compassion, but compassion can become responsible for preserving relationships at my own expense. It didn't give me strength, but strength can become so accustomed to carrying pain that endurance begins masquerading as character. There is a strange pride in being difficult to destroy. I knew how much I could withstand. I knew I could remain functional inside circumstances that would flatten most other people. I could keep going when I was exhausted, make sense of chaos while standing inside it, and find compassion for people who made very little effort to understand me or show me empathy. I respected that woman because I knew what it had cost her to become that capable. But eventually, I had to ask why my strength kept requiring pain to prove itself. If I wasn't the woman who could carry everything, what happened when I put something down? If I wasn't endlessly understanding, who was I when I stopped translating someone's cruelty into a story compassionate enough for me to stay? If I was truly independent, why did receiving sometimes feel more threatening than doing everything myself? Your conscious beliefs can change long before your body stops living by the old rules. If someone's happiness once reduced danger, their disappointment may still create an immediate urge to fix something. If usefulness protected connection, allowing another adult to struggle can feel wrong even when the struggle belongs to them. If anticipating anger once gave you time to prepare, your body can register a tiny shift in someone before you have consciously identified what changed. This becomes complicated for people who are naturally sensitive or intuitive. I am deeply intuitive. I work with energy. Perception is part of how I move through the world. Healing never required me to distrust that. It required me to become more discerning about what happened after I perceived something. I can feel someone's energy change without assuming their change requires something from me. I can recognize anger without searching myself for its cause. I can know something is wrong without volunteering to automatically repair it. I began seeing how often perception had been followed almost instantly by responsibility. The information was not the problem. My automatic participation was. For 15 years as a dominatrix, I worked inside explicit power dynamics where boundaries, surrender, control, and consent had consequences. I learned that surrender and self erasure can look similar from the outside while being entirely different internally. Conscious surrender requires access to your own power because there has to be a self present who can choose. Self erasure happens when keeping the connection, preventing the reaction, or managing the other person becomes more important than remaining connected to yourself. Years later, I recognized versions of that everywhere. Knowing exactly what someone wants does not make me responsible for giving it to them. Being capable of preventing someone's disappointment does not make their disappointment mine to prevent. Understanding why someone behaves badly does not require me to volunteer for the consequences of their unresolved pain. That sounds obvious until your identity has always been built partly around being the person who can handle it. Healing began returning my attention to me, and not everyone benefited from that return. Someone accustomed to endless understanding may experience a limit as coldness. Someone who relied on your competence may resent discovering that you are no longer carrying what belongs to them. Someone can genuinely love you and still be deeply attached to the version of you around whom their life was much easier. You learn a great deal about a relationship when you stop performing the function that helped hold it all together. Can this relationship make room for the person I am becoming? Or does it require the person I had to be? My spiritual and shamanic work gave me language for something psychology alone could never fully explain for me. I do not experience personality as the totality of a human being. Consciousness is not created by trauma, and neither is soul. Trauma can organize the nervous system around threat. It can bind enormous amounts of energy into vigilance, defense, appeasement, and control. It can shape how we express our sensitivity, power, intuition, and desire through the human system. But it does not become the source of what it learned to use. I don't need to find some pristine version of myself who existed before anything painful happened. I'm not interested in imagining who I might have been in another life with another history. I am interested in the woman who actually lived this life and what becomes possible when so much of her energy is no longer occupied with surviving it. Some qualities became quieter as I healed. Others became clearer. I didn't lose perception when I stopped monitoring people. I could perceive without immediately preparing. I didn't lose compassion when I became less accommodating. I stopped making compassion an argument against my own knowing. I didn't lose independence when I became willing to receive. I stopped using self sufficiency to guarantee that nobody would ever have the opportunity to disappoint me. Strength was harder. For much of my life, strength meant capacity under pressure. How much can I carry? How long can I remain standing? How much pain can move through my life without taking me down? There's strength in that. I will never pretend otherwise. But being exceptionally good at surviving can make it harder to recognize when survival itself has become the problem. You stay because you can survive staying. You carry it because you are capable. You tolerate another year because you have already survived worse. Your capacity becomes the argument for continuing something instead of the reason you finally know you can leave it. I had to stop using my ability to endure a reality as proof that the reality belonged in my life. And maybe that is why healing can feel so strange when you have built genuine self respect around qualities that helped you survive. You aren't discovering that your strength was fake, your intuition was fake, or your compassion was fake. You are discovering how much of those gifts was occupied, how much sensitivity was busy monitoring, how much intelligence was busy predicting, how much compassion was busy explaining, how much strength was busy carrying. I do not lose the woman who could survive almost anything. I stopped requiring her to prove it. I can still read a room. I can still feel what someone is not saying. I can understand another human being with enormous complexity. I can carry enormous weight when life actually asks that of me. I simply no longer believe every perception requires my participation. Every wounded person deserves access to me, or every painful thing deserves to discover how much I can withstand. For years, I knew exactly what my strength could survive. I'm much more interested now in discovering what it can create. If you recognize yourself in this, if you understand your history intellectually, but can still feel old survival rules operating through your body, relationships, or energy, this is the work I do privately. I work with psychological understanding, the nervous system, energy, and spiritual integration together because I don't experience them as separate parts of healing. If you are ready to work with me at that depth, you can book a private session at catgrace.com. And thank you for being here. Until next time, namaste.